In printing, you are not just limited to the four process color inks we talked about in the last lecture. There's actually a lot of other special printing processes that you can use in addition to conventional four color printing. I want to talk about a few of those right now. Uh, this is a different type of printing. We call this thermography. And what thermography is, it's a different printing process. And what it does, it uses a much heavier ink and it's applied using heat to it. And what this can do is give you a very pronounced raised surface on your printed piece. So this isn't something that goes through a standard printing press, but it's another way of printing if you want to add something that really has a noticeable raised surface to it. But I'm going to show you a couple ways you can do that with conventional printing as well. But here's some examples of thermography. And again, it's raised printing. You use a rosin that's mixed in with the ink and use heat to apply it so that you get that very pronounced raised surface on this. Then we have what's called spot colors. So these are also referred to as fifth colors or sixth colors. In commercial printing, the four color process is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Now, you can add specific colors to that as a fifth or sixth or seventh color. And when we talk about spot colors, more often than not, we're talking about Pantone colors. And what Pantone colors are, Pantone is a color standardization system that is used throughout the world. And what this does is it's a color palette that ensures that no matter wherever you are in the world, if you specify a very particular color, it will be uniform. So imagine your Target. And Target has stores located all over the world. They need all these materials. They need shopping bags and graphics and all this stuff presented or printed for their stores all over the world. And Target has a very specific color. Their Target red is Pantone 185. And what they can do is by specifying a very specific Pantone color, they know no matter which Target store you go into anywhere in the world, the bags, the graphics, the in-store displays are all going to be the same shade of red that you would see here in the States. So most large corporations specify their branding and their logos in specific Pantone colors. And what most big corporations do is also release basically a design Bible saying these are the colors that we use. So here's for Walmart. Walmart medium blue, you can see that is Pantone 285, and the yellow is Pantone 123. And so they send these style guides out all over the world to all their vendors, anyone who does any work for Walmart or whatever company it is. And this specifies the exact colors they need to use for anything Walmart related. Pantone also releases color trend reports every year where they figure out what colors they see are on trend for the coming year. These are the ones for 2020 that came out. So these were colors that they saw emerging in fashion and housewares, in basically any type of design you could think of. And from those colors, they usually specify a color of the year. So for 2020, the Pantone color of the year was classic blue. And you're probably wondering, well, why do you need to know colors of the year? Well, different designers use this to coordinate. So if you're a fashion designer designing dresses and you want to make sure that somewhere in the world someone is making shoes that can match, or if you're designing furniture and couches, you want throw pillows that match. So they send out these color trends. Now for fashion, Pantone usually releases one for spring and summer and one for fall and winter. So again, you can see how these color trends are then taken out into industry and they're adapted and used for a variety of projects. Now, where do the Pantone colors come from? Every single Pantone color is a combination of these 14 base Pantone colors. So by combining different combinations of these, you will get the entire Pantone color palette. And the reason you use them, here on the top are examples of pure Pantone color. And on the bottom, that's as close as you can get to reproducing those in the CMYK 4-color process. And you'll notice the colors on the bottom, they tend to be a little darker, they tend to be a little dingier or duller than the pure color. So if for your brand or your logo you want a very specific vibrant color, more often than not you'll specify your branding in a very specific Pantone color. This shows you a better example of what that looks like. So on the left, if I'm printing with a pure spot Pantone yellow, it's going to appear as a solid color. And when I try and reproduce that in 4-color printing, it's going to look like this. It's going to be big yellow dots with smaller magenta dots laid over it, which when you combine the magenta and the yellow turns into the red. So when you look at these colors under a magnifying glass, it's not going to be a flat pure color. It's going to be a dot pattern. Other techniques you can use in printing are to add varnishes as part of varnishes or coatings as part of the 5th color. So there's different ways you can do that. This is an example of what we call a UV coating. So there actually is an ink there. It's a very, very high gloss of ink or varnish that is laid like an ink on the paper, but there's actually no color in it. But it will give you that extreme high gloss raised surface in there. This is another type of coating called aqueous coating, as you can probably tell by the name with aqua in the name. It's a water-based coating. This is primarily for protection. So if you look at any packaged good in a grocery store, these packages of cereal boxes get shipped all over the world or all over the country, and they jostle together on their pallets. And by the time they get to the store, the ink could have rubbed off on each other and it could look pretty dingy. By putting an aqueous coating over everything, what it is it's basically a protective coating, which will also give it a little bit of a sheen. Here's another example of that really, really high gloss UV coating, and you see this with a lot of photography, so you can see where you can actually see the light reflecting off the image. That's not part of the ink, that's actually the coating that's put on afterwards. You can also use varnishes as a design element. Here you can see on the business card kind of a black on black design where the design is actually just the varnish. There's actually no ink on it. Or on the brochure on the right, you can specifically have certain areas of photos or type hit with the varnish to give them a sheen, and other areas of the publication be matte. More examples with business cards of using that varnish as a design element in here. And here's some additional examples as well as using coating and varnishes. Now you can also add as spot colors or extra inks, metallic inks that come in every type of metallic you could think of. Now the thing to realize is if you're printing on porous paper, it doesn't matter how metallic the ink looks. Once it hits the porous paper, it's going to have a little bit of a dull sheen to it. And I'll show you another technique. If you really want that metallic look, there's another way we do that. But metallic inks can be something that you can add as an extra color. Here's some examples of metallic inks as well. Also fluorescent inks. Now the thing about fluorescent inks is they work by absorbing ultraviolet energy. The problem with fluorescent inks is they are what we call fugitive, which means they fade really, really quickly. So if something's with fluorescent ink is exposed to sunlight, it's going to fade very, very quickly. But even something exposed to just office lights or regular light bulbs or fluorescent lights are going to fade over time as well. That being said, if it's a project that you don't need to know has to live very long, it can make a really great impression printing with fluorescent inks as well. Here's some other examples of that. This is a trend that I don't know if it really took off, as in an effort to be a little bit more ecologically considerate. There was a movement. A lot of inks can be very, very, very toxic, and there was a concern with those toxins going back into the environment. There was a movement to use inks that were actually made with soy. To be honest with you, it never really took off, and I haven't really seen this designation on many things recently. Other techniques that are more physical or more tactile that you can include in the printing process are what we call embossing or depossing. Embossing is creating a raised surface on top of your paper or your cardboard or whatever substrate you're using. So embossing, the image is raised like you can see there with the wood grain on the business card there. Now, if I flip that business card over, the wood grain is actually going to appear to be impressed into the paper because it's the opposite. That's referred to as debossing. So this is something that's added in as an extra plate. So here you can see an embossing plate on a press. And again, this would run as a fifth cylinder after the 4-color commercial printing colors. Examples of that embossed look you can see here on a brochure, another brochure as well. And I mentioned getting that very metallic ink, metallic look to your printing. As I mentioned, if you use metallic inks, once they hit porous paper, they tend to get absorbed and dulled down a little bit. And if you really want that high gloss, real metallic look to anything you print, what you do is you add this in, again, as a separate plate or a separate roll on the printing process. And what you're actually doing is applying a metallic foil to your design. So the metallic foils, we call this foil stamping, and it's actually stamped onto your printed piece. And there you can see with the packaging down below, you can see that piece is not only foil stamped, but also embossed with the texture on it. So that's a way that you can get that very high metallic look to things. And then the last thing that you can do in the printing process is do what we call die cuts. Die cuts are actually physical manipulation of the paper. You can punch out windows or shapes. You can cut the paper into unique shapes. You can also arrange for these shapes to be folded in unique ways, as you can see in the lower right corner there. So one of the things you have to keep in mind if you design anything with a die cut in it is obviously whatever you cut out of the cover, like you see in the lower left, is also going to be missing in backwards when you open it up. So it's important that you not design over areas that are going to be cut out. You also have to be careful too of structural integrity. And if you look at the Epson packaging on the right, if you start cutting away too much or put too many intricate shapes in there, what can happen is your packaging in this case can start tearing apart and it doesn't have the strength to hang together. But using die cuts, here's some examples with business cards that you can see is a great way to add kind of a tactile texture to your design. And then finally, I put a few, if you want to see how these processes work in reality, I put a few links here to YouTube videos that will show you how the printing process works, how the spot color printing process works, and also to see how die cuts work on a printing press.